Number 10, the survivor. A roommate who survived the quadruple slaughters at the University of Idaho told police she saw a man in black clothes and a mask walking past her in her house on the night of the endings, and she stood frozen and in shock, according to newly released court documents. The roommate said she didn't recognize the man, who walked toward the backsliding glass door at her off-campus home in Moscow, Idaho. According to documents released some time ago, she locked herself in her room after seeing him, the documents said. Other chilling details revealed in the court documents include that the suspect's phone number was near the victim's house at least 12 times before the slaughters, at least as far back as August. But his phone was off when the slaughters unfolded. Two roommates, who police said are not suspects, survived the attacks in the early hours of November 13th. Later that morning, the roommates called friends over to their house because they thought one of the victims on the second floor had passed out and wasn't waking up, police said. Around noon, a 911 call from one of the roommates' phones requested help for an unconscious person, police said. Responders found University of Idaho students Xana Kernodle, Kaylee Gonsalves, Madison Mogan, and Ethan Chapin all stabbed. Number 9, he might have been trying to solve his own crime. The man charged with slaughtering 4 Idaho college students may have joined online chat groups to discuss some of the facts of the brutal slayings with internet sleuths. Brian Kohberger might have been the person or persons making claims about the quadruple case, using the Facebook and Redditor handles Papa Roger and Inside Looking, according to former FBI agent Jennifer Coffindaffer. Coffindaffer, who was tracking both accounts, says many of the allegations made by individual or individuals turned out to be factually accurate, causing her to think it could have been Brian. In 2 of the postings, the person or persons offered a correct timeline for the slaughters and mentioned the knife sheath left at the scene of the crime before police publicly released those details. Here's what one of the messages said, this time coming from the Inside Looking account. Speculation. Butcher parked behind the house, approached property from tree line, entered sliding door and left it open, committed executions and exited sliding door. 1 knife according to coroner's statement. Time of slaying approximately 3:20 in the morning to 3:40 in the morning, according to car fleeing the scene and on camera on Highway 8, approximately 3:45 in the morning. Vehicle left skid marks upon exit. Multiple details starting from when the user mentioned the butcher committed the executions then fled from the sliding door were correct. One user wrote underneath the Reddit post that the dude is solving his own crime, psycho, followed by a couple of emojis. Number 8, the timeline. Police believe the slaughters unfolded between 4 in the morning and 4:25 in the morning, according to the court documents. Kernodle got a DoorDash order at the house at about 4 a.m., according to the affidavit. One of the surviving roommates said she woke up around 4 a.m. from what sounded like Gonsalves playing with her dog in one of the 3rd floor bedrooms, according to the affidavit. A short time after, the roommate said she heard who she thought was Gonsalves say something to the effect of, "There's someone here," the document said. But that could have been Kernodle on her phone because records showed she was on TikTok at about 4:12 in the morning, the affidavit said. The roommate said she looked out of her bedroom but did not see anything when she heard the comment about someone being in the house, the document said. She opened her door a second time when she heard what she thought was crying coming from Kernodle's room. The roommate then said she heard a male voice say something to the effect of, "It's okay, I'm going to help you," according to the documents. The roommate said she opened the door again when she heard the crying, and that's when she saw the figure in the mask, the document said. She described the intruder as 5'10" or taller and not very muscular, but athletically built with bushy eyebrows, according to the documents. At about 4:17 a.m., a security camera less than 50 feet from Kernodle's room picked up sounds of a barking dog and distorted audio of what sounded like voices or a whimper, followed by a loud thud, according to the documents. Number 7, Kohberger might have been bullied. Or was he the bully? At least one individual who knew Kohberger when they were young recalled Kohberger as being quite friendly, and that he was bullied by peers over his weight. He was bullied a lot. It started because of his weight, and it was mainly by females. He was pretty big. Sarah Healy, who attended elementary, middle, and high school with Kohberger in Pleasant Valley, Pennsylvania, told People magazine. He was very quiet, very to himself. He was very into his books. He was really sweet and really quiet. Others who knew Kohberger didn't recall him being bullied at all. Casey Arntz, who was 2 years ahead of Kohberger in high school in Pleasant Valley, said she didn't remember Kohberger ever being bullied and alleged that while Kohberger was always nice to her, he actually bullied her brother at times. I know that he had anger issues and he would have outbursts and stuff. I never saw them face to face. My brother said that when Brian would get angry with him, he would kind of gaslight him and get physically aggressive, Casey, who's 28, told People. Brian never got physically aggressive with my brother, but he was kind of the person who would smash things or punch a wall or something like that. Makes sense why you probably don't know this, as being bullied might have been a motive for his crime, so he hid it. Number 6. The car. After the victims were discovered, authorities reviewed surveillance video from the area and saw the suspect's white Hyundai Elantra go by the victim's house 3 times before entering the area for a 4th time at 4:04 a.m., according to the documents. Police said they traced the car's travel that night back to near Pullman, Washington, where the suspect lived while attending Washington State University. Brian Kohberger, who is accused of ending 4 University Idaho students, is escorted to an extradition hearing at the Monroe County Courthouse in Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania, Tuesday, January 3rd, 2023. Kohberger was a PhD student in Washington State's Department of Criminal Justice and Criminology at the time of the slaughters. Washington State's campus is less than 10 miles from Moscow, Idaho. Moscow police asked law enforcement to look out for white Elantras, the affidavit said, and on November 29th, a Washington State University police officer searched cars that matched that description at the university and found one registered to Kohberger. Kohberger registered his white Elantra in Washington State on November 18th, 5 days after the slaughters, and received a new license plate according to the documents. The car had previously been registered in Pennsylvania, and his Pennsylvania plate was set to expire on November 30th. Number 5, he has a master's in criminal justice. DeSales University confirmed in a statement that Kohberger was an alumni. Kohberger received a bachelor's degree in 2020 and completed his graduate studies in June 2022. A message on the university website read, Kohberger received a master's degree in criminal justice. We are devastated by this senseless tragedy. We also recognize the impact this news can have on our community's well-being. DeSales has expanded counseling services for students, faculty, and staff, the statement continued. As a Catholic Salesian community, we extend deep sympathy and prayers to the family and friends of the victims. While studying at DeSales, Kohberger posted a since-deleted call on Reddit for ex-convicts to participate in what he said was a study sanctioned by the university on how emotions and psychological traits influence decision-making when committing a crime. One of his classmates at DeSales, Brittany Slavin, told the New York Times that Kohberger seemed rather interested in serial slaughterers and developing theories on what happened at crime scenes based on photos presented in class, but that his behavior didn't raise any red flags for her at the time. At the time, it seemed as if he was just a curious student, so if his questions felt odd, we didn't think much of it because it fit our curriculum, she explained. Casey Arntz recalled Kohberger being interested in criminal justice when he was still in high school, but she believed his addiction delayed his plans to go to a college to study the subject. He definitely was interested in criminal justice back then, she said, and I'm seeing from other people now that from former friends and acquaintances and even teachers that said he was always interested in it, and he loved crime movies and TV shows and stuff like that. Number 4, his phone was being tracked. Kohberger's phone was tracked heading to Moscow before the attack and as the driver of the white Elantra returned to Pullman. However, the phone was off from 2:47 in the morning to 4:48 in the morning, which is consistent with Kohberger attempting to conceal his location during the quadruple endings, the document said. His phone was near the victim's house at least 12 times before the slaughters, at least as far back as August, the document said. All of those times except for one were late at night or early in the morning. The morning after the slaughters, he went near the house between 9:12 in the morning and 9:21 in the morning, citing cell phone data. Number 3, who is he? Police said they learned Kohberger applied for an internship with the Pullman Police in the fall of 2022, and in an essay he said he wanted to help rural law enforcement agencies with how to better collect and analyze technological data in public safety operations. Kohberger also posted a Reddit survey which asked for participants to provide information to understand how emotions and psychological traits influence decision making when committing a crime. This was cited earlier. Kohberger appeared in court in Pennsylvania on the first-degree slaughter and burglary charges and agreed to be extradited to Idaho, where he is now in custody. Kohberger's attorney in Pennsylvania, Monroe County Chief Public Defender Jason Labar, said in a statement his client was eager to be exonerated of these charges. Kohberger appeared in court in Moscow. Kaylee Gonsalves' parents stared down Kohberger as he entered the courtroom in a bright orange jumpsuit and no shackles. Brian Kohberger, who is accused of ending 4 University of Idaho students in November 2022, looks toward his attorney, public defender Ann Taylor. During a hearing in Latah County District Court, January 5, 2023, in Moscow, Idaho. Kohberger, whose skinny shoulders could not fill out his jumpsuit, leaned in to confidently answer the judge's questions. The judge asked Kohberger if he wanted to represent himself or have a court-appointed attorney, and he calmly and confidently replied, "I have court-appointed counsel." Charges were read for the slaughters of each student. The judge said that each victim was stabbed and slaughtered with premeditation, with malice and forethought. Families were overcome with emotions as their child's name was read. Number 2, his DNA was found on the sheath of a knife. Listen, I know it's a really bad thing and the crimes are terrible, but how hard is it to take the weapon with you? I mean, like, how do people get caught leaving their weapon at the scene of the crime? If you know, let me know in the comments below, because last time I asked this, you guys actually didn't really say much. According to the affidavit, which was reviewed by People, a sheath of the knife used in the slaughters was left at the scene of the crime in the bed where Mogan and Gonsalves were found. The affidavit states that this is where detectives found DNA linking Kohberger, which they then matched to trash taken from Kohberger's parents' home in Pennsylvania. The affidavit also alleged that around 4:20 a.m. on the night of the ending, a white sedan referred to as Suspect Vehicle 1 in the affidavit was seen leaving the area of the home at a fast rate of speed. The document also stated that the vehicle and phone associated with Kohberger returned to the scene of the crime between 9:12 in the morning and 9:21 in the morning. Additionally, the affidavit alleged that while investigating previous cell phone pings, authorities learned that the cell phone associated with Kohberger pinged in the area of the 1122 King Road home where the endings took place on at least 12 occasions prior to November 13, 2022. All of these occasions, except for one, occurred in the late evening and early morning hours of their respective days, the affidavit read. Which I said earlier, but I wanted to reinstate it just so you guys get the picture. Number 1, his personality changed. Joey Famularo had Kohberger as a teaching assistant in one of her classes at Washington State, and previously spoke about her experiences with him on TikTok. She recalled that Kohberger was a tough grader early in the semester, but that his behavior changed after November 12, 2022, when the executions occurred. She noted that there were no real red flags about him and that her class of 150 students didn't see him very often, but explained after November 12th, his behavior changed significantly. Famularo noted that in October, Kohberger had failed all of his students on a test and left several comments on their work. Then, starting November and December, he started just handing out hundreds and leaving very minimal comments, she said. So that was, I think, probably the biggest behavior change. It seems he had his mind busy with other things. Number 10. I haven't blocked out the past. I wouldn't trade the person I am or what I've done or the people I've known for anything, so I do think about it. And at times it's a rather mellow trip to lay back and remember. Ted Bundy is notoriously a ruthless man. Even in this quote, he seems to be thinking fondly about his executions. One of the biggest ways to identify someone as having sociopathic tendencies is to determine their relationship to feelings and emotions. When Bundy says it's a rather mellow trip to lay back and remember, he isn't talking about some trip to Florence or something. He's talking about the ecstatic feeling when he committed the executions. He feels nothing but mellow for the crimes he's committed. This is reinforced in number 9. I don't feel guilty for anything. I feel sorry for people who feel guilt. This proves that Ted Bundy is remorseless. A person who is remorseless doesn't feel any guilt. If you're remorseless, you don't feel bad at all, even if you've done something terrible. When someone is remorseless, that person has no feeling of pity for people who have been hurt. The night before his execution, Bundy confessed to 30 of his crimes, but the true total remains unknown. Published estimates have run as high as 100 or more, and Bundy occasionally made cryptic comments to encourage that speculation. He told Ainsworth in 1980 that for every execution publicized, there could be one that was not. When FBI agents proposed a total tally of 36, Bundy responded, "Add one digit to that, and you'll have it." It seemed like Bundy had no care for anything. turning the entire tragedy into a game for the FBI and the public. Both have called him evil before. He didn't believe he was. At number 8, Ted Bundy said this: "Society wants to believe it can identify evil people, or bad or harmful people. But it's not practical. There are no stereotypes." This quote is like a twisted and malformed version of the classic idiom, "the world isn't black or white." When Bundy says there are no stereotypes, he is trying to shame the media. The public who scorns him detests his very existence. He shames the articles depicting him as the devil or as an evil person. Think about that for a moment. Ted Bundy, infamous executioner, bringer of self-righteous despair, feels so little for his actions that he is shaming the people who identify him as evil. Another interesting facet of this quote is him saying, "It's not practical." Of course, any common sociopath doesn't feel guilt or remorse. Instead, they think in practicality. It's them or me. At number 7, what's one less person on the face of the earth anyways? With this quote, it's easy to derive what Bundy thought about what he was doing. In the United States, between the years 1974 and 1978, 16,131,855 people were recorded as born. Those years are significant, as those are the years Bundy was active. He knew how many people were born every day. He knew they had ties to families and friends. He just didn't care. In the grand scheme of things, to him, it was just one life out of billions. Millions of people pass away each year, each month, each day. What's one more? In a vast universe, millions of galaxies and systems and stars and planets, what could the effect of one man with a knife produce? Why would it matter? To him, it doesn't matter. At number 6, execution is not just a crime of lust or violence. It becomes possession. They are part of you. The victim becomes a part of you, and you two are forever one. And the grounds where you remove them or leave them become sacred to you, and you will always be drawn back to them. This explanation is especially interesting, as it might have revealed something about the thought processes of other criminals of the same caliber. Many criminals are arrested or found at the scene of the crime or around it. It seems Bundy was right about that. It's a sacred place, the place where you permanently implemented someone into your story. At number 5, those of us who have been so much influenced by violence in the media, in particular adult media violence, are not some kinds of inherent monsters. We're your sons, and we are your husbands, and we grew up in regular families. And adult media can reach out and snatch a kid out of any house today. It snatched me out of my home 20, 30 years ago. Interestingly, Bundy actually blames adulterated content for how he turned out, though I suppose it makes sense why he blamed that instead of himself. After all, to him, it could never be himself. Addiction to adult content has been rising in recent times, and nowadays there are resources to help quell the urges. However, back in the 60s and 70s, it was most likely very stigmatized by society. At number 4, when you feel the last bit of breath leaving their body, you're looking into their eyes. A person in that situation is God. Bundy made it clear how intimate he feels with the victim before, after, and during his execution of them. Narcissistic personality disorder, the proper term for some who have a God complex, is a rare mental disorder characterized by an inflated sense of self-importance, entitlement, a deep need for admiration, and an alarming lack of empathy for other people. Executioners like Bundy see themselves as better than everyone else, thinking of themselves as gods amongst men, worthy of taking out anyone who opposes them. These are the most dangerous people in the world, the ones that believe they run it. At number 3, I don't think anybody doubts whether I've done some bad things. The question is what, of course, and how, and maybe even most importantly, why? It seems Bundy contradicts his previous quote, the one where he says, "Society wants to believe it can identify evil people, or bad or harmful people, but it's not practical." He outright admits to have done bad things, which raises more questions than answers. He again toys with the interviewer, asking questions to the interviewer from a third-person perspective of himself. These really are the most important questions, but Bundy has no real intention of answering them in this interview. Aside from that, perhaps Bundy believes that society has no right to call individuals bad people or evil, and it is left up to the individual to decide that for themselves. Either way, Bundy admits to doing bad things. At number 2, I understand now a lot of stuff about myself that I didn't understand then. It makes me realize what was going on. The senselessness of it appalls me, although I'm sure not so much as those who were so close to it. This quote is confusing for several reasons. He states how the senselessness of it all appalled him, but does that mean he is remorseful and regretting of his actions? Or is he referring to how convoluted his executions were, wishing he'd been cleaner with them? I interpret this as him noticing how close to the electric chair he truly is, wishing he had been a better and more efficient criminal. I believe Bundy wanted to do more with his life and less in others. At number 1, after his last meal, steak and eggs, Bundy was sent to the parish chamber on the morning of January 24th, 1989. When asked if he had any last words, he said, "Jim and Fred, I'd like you to give my love to my family and friends." After that, he was executed via the electric chair. Jim Coleman was Bundy's defense attorney, and Fred Lawrence was his minister. They had both spent a considerable amount of time with Ted Bundy. The story of Ted Bundy is one of tragedy and insanity, one that I hope isn't recreated in the future. Stay safe out there. Number 10, BTK. The BTK had to report his thoughts on the case to TMZ because no one else would listen. The BTK serial ender seems to be shocked in either a good way or a bad way, I can't tell, that Bryan Kohberger shares some of his traits and that one of his own attacks, a quadruple termination, is scarily similar to the Idaho student's slayings. Dennis Rader, who gave himself the nickname BTK, told TMZ in a new email he believes Kohberger would lie in wait for his victims, stalking them and casing their home. All of this, BTK says, was much like I did, referencing Kohberger's dark mind, which he can relate to. BTK also pointed out chilling parallels between his brutal 1974 termination of the Otero family in Kansas and the 4 slain University of Idaho students whom Kohberger has been charged with fatally stabbing in an off-campus home. And 4, much like the Oteros, up close and personal stabbed, BTK wrote, although he asphyxiated 4 Otero family members after tying them up in their Wichita house. He went on to mention that Kohberger left DNA at the crime scene just like he did at the Otero house, leaving his fluids on one of the victim's body. It took police years to link BTK to the crimes after advancement in DNA technology. However, Kohberger was soon connected to the Idaho terminations after his DNA was found on a knife sheath, cops said. It seems Kohberger is following in the footsteps of BTK, and BTK seems almost proud. That's creepy. Number 9, he might have been trying to solve his own crime. The man charged with slaughtering 4 Idaho college students may have joined online chat groups to discuss some of the facts of the brutal slayings with internet sleuths. Bryan Kohberger might have been the person or persons making claims about the quadruple execution case, using the Facebook and Redditor handles Papa Roger and Inside Looking, respectively, according to former FBI agent Jennifer Coffindaffer. Coffindaffer, who is tracking both accounts, says many of the allegations made by the individual turned out to be factually accurate, causing her to think it could have been Bryan. In 2 of the postings, the person or persons offered a correct timeline for the executions and mentioned the knife sheath left at the crime scene before police publicly released those details. Here's what one of the messages said, this time coming from the Inside Looking account. Speculation. Butcher parked behind the house, approached property from the tree line, entered sliding door and left it open, committed executions and exited sliding door. 1 knife according to coroner's statement. Time of slaying approximately 3:20 in the morning to 3:40 in the morning according to car fleeing scene and on camera on Highway 8 approximately 3:45 in the morning. Vehicle left skid marks upon exit. Multiple details starting from when the user mentioned the butcher committed the executions then fled from the sliding door were correct. One user wrote underneath the Reddit post that the dude is solving his own crime and that he's a psycho, followed by a couple of emojis. Number 8, Kohberger might have been bullied. Or was he the bully? At least one individual who knew Kohberger when they were really young recalled Kohberger as being quiet but friendly, and that he was bullied by peers over his weight. He was bullied a lot. It started because of his weight, and it was mainly by females. He was pretty big. Sarah Healy, who attended elementary, middle, and high school with Kohberger in Pleasant Valley, Pennsylvania, told People magazine. He was very quiet, very to himself. He was very into his books, and he was really sweet and really quiet. Others who knew Kohberger didn't recall him being bullied at all. Casey Arntz, who was 2 years ahead of Kohberger in high school in Pleasant Valley, said he didn't remember Kohberger ever being bullied and alleged that while Kohberger was always nice to her, he actually bullied her brother at times. I know that he had anger issues and he would have outbursts and stuff. I never saw them face to face. My brother said that when Bryan would get angry with him, he would kind of gaslight him and get physically aggressive. Bryan never got physically aggressive with my brother, but he was kind of the person who would smash things or punch a wall or something like that. Makes sense why he would hide this from the police, as being bullied might have been a motive for this crime. Number 7, he might have been close friends with a needle. Several of Kohberger's classmates from his teens recalled him using a substance in a needle, with some alleging that Kohberger offered the substance to others before he went to rehab in 2013. Lee Mack, who graduated from Pleasant Valley High School in 2012, told People that she befriended Kohberger after meeting him at a party. Brian never gave off red flags that I knew of. He was always weird, but what teenage kid who's trying to find himself isn't weird, you know? She said, noting that Kohberger briefly joined her friend group, but then they grew apart after Kohberger allegedly offered another friend a substance. He offered my best friend a substance in a needle, and we just realized he was a little bit more far gone than we had expected to deal with, and so we had to end our friendship, Max said. She added that Kohberger later reached out to her 2 years after graduation. He said, "Hey, I'm getting clean. I want to do something really good for my life and for people." Number 6, he has a psychology degree. This might be why he could have been in those crime group chats, trying to solve his own crime. He might have been studying his own psychology to find and remove his imperfections. Kohberger earned a bachelor's degree in psychology at a local community college near his eastern Pennsylvania hometown, the New York Times reported. Jack Bayless, who befriended Kohberger in 8th grade, told People magazine that Kohberger was very interested in psychology as a teen. He is super curious, probably the most curious person who you'll ever meet. Guaranteed, Bayless said. He was really into psychology, how people thought and whatnot. He's always been really into that kind of stuff. If you're like, oh, why do people like this? Why do men blah blah blah? Or why do women blah blah blah? He'd get all into those kinds of things and wondering differences between just how different people think and all that, Bayless added. Reconciling the idea that his childhood friend is accused of ending 4 young adults hasn't been easy. Bayless, who last saw Kohberger in 2021 when they shot airsoft guns at each other, explained, "He's always been nice to me, always friendly to me. Never seemed like a bad guy," Bayless said. "I hope he's innocent. I hope it was anyone else, because you don't want your friend to have been a butcher. It's not fun." Number 5, he has a master's in criminal justice. DeSales University confirmed in a statement that Kohberger was an alum. Kohberger received a bachelor's degree in 2020 and completed his graduate studies in June 2022. A message on the university website read, Kohberger received a master's degree in criminal justice. We are devastated by this senseless tragedy. We also recognize the impact this news can have on our community's well-being. DeSales has expanded counseling services for students, faculty, and staff, the statement continued. As a Catholic Salesian community, we extend deep sympathy and prayers to the family and friends of the victims. While studying at DeSales, Kohberger posted a since-deleted call on Reddit for ex-convicts to participate in what he said was a study sanctioned by the university on how emotions and psychological traits influence decision-making when committing a crime. One of his classmates at DeSales, Brittany Slavin, told the New York Times that Kohberger seemed rather interested in serial slaughterers and developing theories on what happened at crime scenes based on photos presented in class, but this behavior didn't raise any flags for her at the time. At the time, it seemed as if he was just a curious student. So if his questions felt odd, we didn't think much of it because it fit our curriculum, she explained. Casey Arntz recalled Kohberger being interested in criminal justice when he was still in high school, but she believed his addiction delayed his plans to go to college to study the subject. He definitely was interested in criminal justice back then, she said, and I'm seeing from other people now that from former friends and acquaintances and even teachers that said he was always interested in it and he loved crime movies and TV shows and stuff like that. Number 4, he was warned by a bar. Several months ago, Kohberger was warned about his interactions with women working and frequenting a bar in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Jordan Sorolnik, the owner of Seven Sirens Brewing Company, told NBC News. Sorolnik explains that the bar staff scan IDs of all patrons and that they can add notes that pop up in their internal system. Staff put in there, "Hey, this guy makes creepy comments, keep an eye on him. He'll have 2 or 3 beers and then just get a little too comfortable," Sorolnik recalled. The brewery owner added that Kohberger would often sit alone at the bar, observing and watching other patrons, and that he asked female staff and customers questions about where they lived and who they were at the bar with. Sorolnik said that if women weren't interested in conversing with Kohberger, he would get upset with them a little bit, and that Kohberger called a female staffer a B-word when she wouldn't answer his questions. Sorolnik said of his final interaction with Kohberger, "I went up to him and I said, 'Hey Brian, welcome back. We appreciate you coming back. I just wanted to tell you real quick and make sure that you're going to be respectful this time and we're not going to have any issues.'" Sorolnik said that Kohberger seemed shocked at his remarks and told the owner, "I don't know what you're talking about. You totally have me confused." Sorolnik says that Kohberger never returned to the bar after that conversation. Number 3, he was pulled over on a road trip twice. After Kohberger was arrested, body camera footage was released that showed him getting pulled over twice in one day while on a cross-country road trip from Washington to Pennsylvania with his father. Kohberger was driving a white Hyundai Elantra, the same vehicle authorities were searching for in connection with the case, and the same vehicle my friend Ahmed calls the Batmobile. To be fair, his car is pretty fast and it's blacked out. He was stopped both times for following a vehicle too closely. He was released with a verbal warning on both occasions, and after Kohberger's arrest, the vehicle was taken from his family home. At the time of the traffic stop, there was no information available on a suspect for the crimes in Idaho, to include identifying information or any specific information related to the license plate state or number of the white Hyundai Elantra, which was being reported in the media to have been seen in and around where the crime occurred. The Hancock County Sheriff's Office said in a statement obtained by multiple outlets. What are the chances, eh? Number 2, his DNA was found on the sheath of a knife. Listen, I know it's a really bad thing and the crimes are terrible, but how hard is it to take the weapon with you? How do people actually get caught leaving their weapon at the crime scene? If you know, let me know in the comments below. According to the affidavit, which was reviewed by People, a sheath of the knife used in the executions was left at the scene in the bed where Mogan and Gonsalves were found. The affidavit states that this is where detectives found DNA linking Kohberger, which they then matched to trash taken from Kohberger's parents' home in Pennsylvania. The affidavit also alleged that around 4:20 a.m. on the night of the execution, a white sedan referred to as Suspect Vehicle 1 in the affidavit was seen leaving the area of the home at a fast rate of speed. The document also stated that the vehicle and phone associated with Kohberger returned to the crime scene between 9:12 in the morning and 9:21 in the morning. Additionally, the affidavit alleged that while investigating previous cell phone pings, authorities learned that the cell phone associated with Kohberger pinged in the area of 1122 King Road home, where the executions took place on at least 12 occasions prior to November 13th, 2022. All of these occasions, except for one, occurred in the late evening and early morning hours of their respective days, the affidavit read. Number 1, his personality changed. Joey Famularo had Kohberger as a teaching assistant in one of her classmates at Washington State, and previously spoke about her experiences with him on TikTok. She recalled that Kohberger was a tough grader early in the semester, but that his behavior changed after November 12, 2022, when the executions occurred. She noted that there was no real red flags about him and that her class of 150 students didn't see him very often, but explained after November 12th his behavior suddenly changed significantly. Famularo noted that in October, Kohberger had failed all of his students on a test and left several comments on their work. Then, starting November and December, he started just handing out hundreds and leaving very minimal comments, she said. So that was, I think, probably the biggest behavior change. It seems he had his mind busy with other things. Number 10. He was always fascinated by terminating things. Edmund Emil Kemper III, born on December 18, 1948, had a contentious relationship with his beverage-addicted mother, Clarnell Strandberg, who moved him and his 2 sisters from Burbank, California to Montana after she divorced his father in 1957. He showed signs of severe mental disturbance from an early age, when he would cut off the heads of his sisters' dolls and even coerced his sisters into playing a game called Gas Chamber, in which he had them blindfold him and lead him to a chair where he pretended to writhe in agony until he passed away. At 10, he buried one of the family cats alive, and at 13, he ended another with a knife. Abuse of animals is a really early sign of psychopathy, so if you know any scumbag that does those things to animals, then keep a distance and maybe tell someone you trust.
It started with surrogates at a non-human level. Physical objects, my possessions, other people's, destruction of things that are cared about. And then destruction of things that are living on a lower level, small animals, insects, animals, and then finally people.
Number 9, he ended his own grandparents. After sending him to live with his father, briefly in the hopes this would cure his behavior,
I wanted to be with my father, and I wanted to get away from my mother because I was dreaming, thinking, fantasizing all day long. I couldn't get it out of my head.
His mother tried passing him on to live with his paternal grandparents in North Fork, California, hoping they could be of more help to him. Unfortunately, she couldn't have been more wrong. After a fight with his grandmother in 1964, then 15-year-old Kemper shot and ended her in the kitchen, and when his grandfather returned to the house, he shot and ended him too. He later explained to authorities that he removed his grandmother to see what it felt like, and that he terminated his grandfather so he wouldn't have to grieve the loss of his wife.
And then a month later, I'm up living with my grandparents in the mountains, and 10 months later, I murdered them.
Sounds like he thinks it was a service to his grandfather to remove him from the world. Kemper's crimes were deemed incomprehensible for a 15-year-old to commit, and court psychiatrists diagnosed him with paranoid schizophrenia. He was sent to Atascadero State Hospital, a maximum security facility in San Luis Obispo County that houses mentally ill convicts.
And I sensed everybody in the world just stopping what they were doing, turning around, saw what I did, and are coming to get me.
Number 8, he tricked several medical professionals. Following the slaughter of his grandparents, a variety of tests led to his being diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and sent to Atascadero State Mental Hospital, a maximum security facility for mentally ill convicts. When he was released at the age of 21, the professionals at the hospital declared him to be a perfect example of the benefits of rehabilitating youthful offenders. This statement, written by his probation officer upon completion of the program, makes this painfully clear. If I were to see this patient without having any history available or getting any history from him, I would think that we're dealing with a very well-adjusted young man who had initiative, intelligence, and who was free of any psychiatric illness. It is my opinion that he has made a very excellent response to the years of treatment and rehabilitation, and I would see no psychiatric reason to consider him to be any danger to himself or to another member of society. And since it may allow him more freedom as an adult to develop his potential, I would consider it reasonable to have a permanent expunction of his juvenile records. Number 7, he was a state trooper. In 1969, at the age of 21, Kemper was released from Atascadero State Mental Hospital, where he had been committed following the slaughter of his grandparents. He attended community college in the hopes of bettering himself, all the while still living with his mother. He desperately wanted to be a state trooper, however, he was not accepted to train. Oddly enough, this wasn't because he had been hospitalized following the execution of his grandparents, but because at 6'9" and 300 pounds, he was just too big and too tall. In fact, following his release and after some urging from his mother, Kemper's juvenile record was erased, leaving the troopers with no idea of his previous crimes. Kemper was released on parole on his 21st birthday. Then he went on an 11-month removal spree targeting women. Between May 1972 and April 1973, Kemper butchered 5 college students, a high school student, his mother, and her best friend. He severed the heads of all of his victims except that of his mother's best friend, whom he strangled April 20th, 1973, to support a made-up story that she and his mother had gone away on vacation together. Kemper, who became known as the Co-Ed Butcher, was arrested 4 days later after he drove to Pueblo, Colorado and called the police from a phone booth to confess. Number 6, he tricked people by being in a rush.
Elaborate precautions. He drove around universities and picked up hitchhiking co-eds while wearing these glasses.
Yeah. These are the ones. Now, would you get in the car with this man? Huh?
With no work prospects on the horizon, he became bored with his existence once again, and as we know from his previous crimes, a bored psychopath is a dangerous thing. Instead, he turned his attention to the high number of female hitchhikers in the area. In 1972, Kemper slaughtered 18-year-old Mary Ann Pesci, 18-year-old Anita Luchessa, and Aiko Koo. In 1973, he slaughtered 19-year-old Cindy Shaw, 23-year-old Rosalind Thorpe, and 21-year-old Alice Liu. He had convinced the young co-eds, who were all in the prime of their lives, that he was not a threat to them, by using a cunning trick to get them into his car. Kemper said some girls weren't really convinced, so I looked at my watch and I sighed, like, come on, I don't have time. And that convinced them. They had the impression I was in a hurry and didn't have time to hurt them. Number 5. He wasn't the only active butcher in the area. Edmund Kemper was not the only active serial butcher in the Santa Cruz area in the early 1970s. 2 other men, Herbert Mullen and John Linley Frazier, were also active in the area. The police even suspected Mullen of having ended 2 of Kemper's victims, while Kemper was initially a suspect in one of Mullen's executions. The police definitely had several investigative issues related to the 3 executioners at the time. Mullen and Kemper both ended people in very gruesome ways, and Mullen was eventually convicted on 10 counts of slaughter, in which he was sentenced to life in prison. The 2 serial butchers also had some interaction while in custody. While in neighboring jail cells, Kemper performed what he called behavior modification treatment on Mullen by giving him peanuts whenever Mullen was good. He sometimes bothered other prisoners by singing, so Kemper splashed water on him. Mullen is still incarcerated and not eligible for parole until 2021. John Linley Frazier was a mass terminator who shot and ended a doctor, his wife, 2 sons, and the doctor's secretary, which led to his conviction and execution sentence in 1971. After California abolished the execution penalty in 1972, his sentence was commuted to life in prison. His odd religious behavior was revealed in the note he left behind at the slaughters, part of which said, "From this day forward, anyone and or everyone or company of persons who misuses the natural environment or destroys same will suffer the penalty of demise by the people of the free universe. I and my comrades from this day forth will fight until demise or freedom against anyone who does not support natural life on this planet. Materialism must go, or mankind will stop." He was found passed away hanging in his cell in 2009 at the age of 63. Number 4, he ended his mother in the most gruesome way.
He was released to the one person that authorities at the state mental hospital recommended he never see again.
The rage and disdain Kemper felt for his mother finally reached a boiling point in April 1973. On Good Friday, his mother returned home after a night of drinking and began arguing with her son. Kemper then entered her bedroom and bludgeoned her with a hammer before cutting her throat with a knife. He then decapitated the body and later revealed he pinned the head against the wall and screamed at it for an hour whilst throwing darts. He also confessed to ripping out her voice box, which he deemed appropriate as she yelled and screamed at him so much over the years. After hiding the body parts around the house, his mother's close friend came over to the house too, and he strangled her. Later, he said, "I certainly wanted for my mother a nice, quiet, easy passing like everyone else wants." Kemper targeted women as they reminded him of his mother and his overall hatred for women. He stabbed or strangled his victims and would later decapitate or dismember the corpses. Several discarded body parts were found washed up on the shore, and he buried a head in his mother's backyard. The other heads he kept as sickening serial butcher trophies.
Ed Kemper has been serving a life sentence in this California prison since 1973.
Number 3, he confessed to the police.
During that time, I become engaged to someone who's young and is beautiful and very much the same advantages and very much the same upbringing and Disneyland values. And she's very much the reason I surrendered.
On Easter Sunday 1973, Kemper fled his mother's home following her slaughter and made his way to Colorado. He realized it would not be long before the crime was linked to him, so he rang the police back in Santa Cruz to make a full confession. Initially, the police did not believe his confession or were convinced they had finally caught the feared co-ed butcher. Kemper was close friends with the local police, often drinking with them in bars and restaurants. They referred to him as Big Ed and had revealed to him over the time a lot about the slaughters, which allowed him to anticipate their next move in the investigation. They believed this was all one big prank from a friend that had become known as a friendly giant. Kemper waited for an officer to arrive and arrest him. He was considered legally sane, and when asked what he believed was an appropriate punishment for his crime, he replied execution by torture. Number 2, he scared an FBI agent. Stanford psychiatrist Donald Lunde interviewed Kemper from 1972 to 1973. The guards would lock them both in a small room, and a panic button under the table would alert them when they finished. Lunde said, "I laughed at the notion that he might attack me. He had no reason to do so, and besides, the panic button would bring a squad of deputies instantly." Kemper then reminded Lunde, "Has it ever dawned on you that I'm a foot taller and weigh damn near twice as you?" When Lunde hit that panic button, it took 7 minutes for the guards to respond. Former FBI agent Robert K. Ressler had a similar interaction with Kemper. Bundled in the same interview room, Ressler hit the panic button and the guards didn't respond. Noticing his panic, Kemper chillingly told him, "If I went ape in here, you'd be in a lot of trouble, wouldn't you? I could screw your head off and place it on the table to greet the guard." The guards entered the room 30 minutes later. That's scary. Number 1, he's still alive today. On November 8, 1973, Kemper was found guilty of first-degree execution. He was sentenced to life behind bars and is currently imprisoned at the California Medical Facility. Since 1977, he has spent his time recording audiobooks and loaned his voice to Flowers in the Attic, The Glass Key, and The Rosary Slaughters, to name a few. He spent more than 5,000 hours in the recording booth at the prison and has received 2 awards for his efforts. However, the serial butcher has no desire to leave prison, as he's quite content living out the rest of his life behind bars. Since 1985, he has waived his right to parole hearings. In 2017, this is his belief. No one's ever going to let him out, and he's just happy. He's just as happy going about his life in prison. In his 70s, he will spend the rest of his days in prison and, at the time of writing, in relatively good health. Kemper has outlived his victims by decades. Number 10. Zodiac. Most people are usually quiet about their crimes, but Zodiac, as he dubbed himself, was anything but. From 1968 to 1969, he terrorized San Francisco with his spree, taunting the police with his coded letters to the local paper. He had at least 5 terminations directly connected to him, although he claims to have ended the lives of 37. His terror began with Betty Lou Jensen and David Arthur Faraday. They were found lying outside of their bullet-peppered car. Jensen was found passed away at the scene with 5 gunshot wounds to her back, while Faraday passed away from a bullet to the head en route to the hospital. Half a year later, a couple who parked their car 4 miles away from that crime scene was also gunned down, 1 injured and 1 gone from the world. The survivor, Michael Mago, was able to give a description of the butcher. He described a heavyset white man around 5'8". It would be the Zodiac himself that would give the police the remaining evidence. At 12:48 a.m. that same night, police received a strange call. I wish to report a double slaughter. If you go 1 mile east in Columbus Parkway to a public park, you will find the people in a brown car. They've been shot with a 9mm Luger. I also ended those people last year. Goodbye. A month later, newspapers received the first letter from the Zodiac. He demanded them publish the letter on the front page or he'd go on a rampage. The letter described the slaughters, all written with mysterious ciphers that seemed to form a code. This was a common theme with the other letters he would send, all signed with a crossed circle symbol. One such letter was decoded by a high school teacher and his wife. Number 9. Noises. In December 2016, a CIA officer checked into the American Embassy's health office in Havana, suffering from nausea, headache, and dizziness. Days later, 2 more CIA officers reported similar ailments. By late 2018, the number grew to 26 Americans and 13 Canadians experiencing nausea, hearing loss, vertigo, nosebleeds, and focusing issues. In all the cases, victims claimed that the symptoms were triggered by a strange noise they'd heard at their homes or in hotel rooms. One person said the noise was high-pitched. Another described a beam of sound pointed into their rooms. Some insisted that the noise more closely resembled marbles rolling along a floor. The illnesses confounded medical experts. Doctors at the University of Pennsylvania who examined some of the victims diagnosed concussion-like symptoms but found no sign they'd suffered any concussions. I know what you must be thinking. The Cuban government is up to something, right? The Cubans vehemently deny they're responsible, and many American investigators believe them. That's because they still don't know what or who made the victims sick. Was it a new type of weapon? The CIA claims it doesn't know of any weaponry that could cause these symptoms. What about ultrasound? One theory holds that a pair of covert eavesdropping devices placed too close to each other by Cuban agents may have inadvertently produced such a reaction, like the kind of feedback you would hear when someone stands too close to a microphone or 2 phones that are calling each other in the same room. But the FBI has found no evidence to substantiate that argument. In fact, ultrasound is above the range of human hearing. Number 8. D.B. Cooper. November 24th, 1971. Dan Cooper was a passenger on Northwest Airlines Flight 305 from Portland to Seattle, a 30-minute flight. Pretty short. He was described by passengers and flight attendants as a man in his mid-40s wearing a dark suit, black tie with a mother-of-pearl tie clip, and a neatly pressed white-collared shirt. He took his seat, lit a cigarette, because you could do that back then, and politely ordered a bourbon and soda, for which he paid cash. Shortly after takeoff, he handed a note to a 23-year-old flight attendant who ignored it, assuming it was just the man's phone number. "Miss, you'd better look at that note," Dan Cooper told her. "I have a bomb." The note's exact wording is part of the mystery, since Cooper reclaimed it after the flight attendant read it, but his demands were $200,000 in negotiable American currency, worth about $1 million today, 4 parachutes, and a fuel truck standing by in Seattle to refuel the plane on arrival. The flight attendant brought the demands to the captain. The airline's president authorized full cooperation. The other passengers had no idea what was happening, having been told that landing was delayed due to mechanical difficulties. At 5:39 p.m., the plane landed, an airline employee delivered a cash-filled knapsack and parachutes, and Cooper allowed all passengers and 2 flight attendants to leave the plane. During refueling, Cooper outlined his plan to the crew, a southeasterly course towards Mexico with 1 further refueling stop in Nevada. 2 hours later, the plane took off. When it landed in Reno, Cooper's absence was noted. Cooper, from whom the media mistakenly referred to as DB Cooper, was never seen or heard from again. No parachute was found, and the ransom money was never used. In 1980, a young boy on vacation with his family in Oregon found several packets of the ransom money, identifiable by serial number, leading to an intense search of the area for Cooper or his remains. Nothing was ever found. For a time, it was speculated that Mad Men's fictional Don Draper was the man who would become Cooper. In the real world, a parachute strap was found in 2007 at one of Cooper's possible landing sites. Every year, the mystery gets closer to us and further at the same time. Maybe 2023 will finally reveal the truth. Number 7, Area 51. Area 51 in southern Nevada is a US military base, the very existence of which was unconfirmed until 2013, when the CIA was obliged to respond to a Freedom of Information Act request from 2005. Based on historical evidence, it would appear that Area 51 supports the development and testing of experimental aircraft and weapons. Public satellite images, such as those available on Google Maps, don't provide insight. Even those with security clearance to visit Area 51 are transported there from Las Vegas via an airline called Janet, whose airplanes are unmarked and which shrouds its windows upon descent. The intense secrecy around Area 51 has sparked rumors that the government uses it to house crashed UFOs and conduct lab tests on aliens. Other theories about what Area 51 is used for include research on time travel, research on teleportation, meetings with extraterrestrials, development of a means for weather control, and activities related to a shadowy one-world government. Where these theories come from is as much as a mystery as Area 51 itself, but one thing is certain: people love a good conspiracy theory. At one point, conspiracy theorists believed that the moon landing in 1969 had been faked. It wasn't. And if you think it was, discuss about it in the comments. Number 6, Paula Jean Weldon. Paula Jean Weldon, who was 18, was a sophomore at Bennington College on December 1st, 1946, the day she told her roommate, Elizabeth Parker, she was going for a long walk, but failed to return. A search focused primarily on Vermont's Long Trail, a 270-mile trail that cut through Vermont to the Canadian border, where local witnesses reported having seen her. The trail yielded no clues, however, and soon, what the Bennington Banner refers to as tantalizing and unquestionably strange leads began to materialize. These include claims by a Massachusetts waitress that she'd served an agitated young woman matching Paula's description. Upon learning of this particular lead, Paula's father disappeared for 36 hours, supposedly in pursuit of the lead. But it was nevertheless a strange move that led to his becoming a prime suspect in Paula's disappearance. Soon, stories began circulating that Paula's home life was not nearly as idyllic as her parents had told the police. Apparently, Paula had not returned home for Thanksgiving the week prior, and she may have been distraught about a disagreement with her father. For his part, Paula's father posited a theory that Paula was distraught about a boy she liked and that perhaps the boy should have been a suspect. Over the next decade, a local Bennington man twice bragged to friends that he knew where Paula's body was buried. He was unable to lead the police to any body, however, let alone Paula's. With no evidence of a crime, no body, and no forensic clues, the case grew colder, and the theories grew stranger, including those linked to the paranormal. New England author and occult researcher Joseph Citro came up with the Bennington Triangle theory, which explained the disappearance as linked to a special energy that attracts outer space visitors, who would have taken Paula with them back to their world. Number 5, missing settlement. In 1587, John White led a group of people from Britain to found an English colony, settling on Roanoke Island, one of a chain of barrier islands now known as the Outer Banks of North Carolina. White left for more supplies, but on his return 3 years later, found the colony meticulously abandoned, with all houses and fortifications dismantled with care. Before he'd left the colony, White had instructed the colonists that, if they were taken by force, they were to carve a cross into a nearby tree, but there was no cross. The only clue was the word Croatoan, the name of a native tribe allied with the English, which was carved into a post. White took this to mean that the colonists had moved to Croatoan Island, now known as Hatteras. Ensuing investigations turned up claims that the colonists had been slaughtered by the Powhatan tribe, but there is no archaeological evidence of this, and a recent re-examination of the primary sources indicates that any massacre that occurred was not of this particular group of colonists, but rather a group of colonists who had arrived earlier. Number 4, Tunguska. On the morning of June 30th, 1908, 770 square miles of forest in Serbia, Russia, were flattened by what would have appeared to have been an explosion, except that there were no witnesses and no other evidence. The phenomenon, known as the Tunguska event, has been classified by scientists as the largest impact event in recorded history, yet no impact crater has ever been found, which would be an important earmark of an impact event. Thus, scientists can only surmise what may have happened, which may be that an asteroid exploded over the Earth and the destruction that ensued beneath it in Siberia was the result of after effects. Number 3. Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. On March 8, 2014, while flying from Malaysia to China, a Boeing 777 carrying 239 passengers and crew members seems to have vanished into thin air. The multinational search effort, the largest in aviation history, has turned up a mere 20 pieces of aircraft debris. The Prime Minister of Malaysia has declined to comment other than to say that the aircraft disappeared over the Indian Ocean. The lack of closure has engendered multiple theories, many of which are considered conspiracy theories, which, according to Harvard professor Cass Sunstein, are a natural product of horrific and disastrous situations because such events make people angry, fearful, and looking for a target. Theories include hijacking, capture by the United States, crew self-execution, it was reported that the pilot was having marital problems, a fire aboard the aircraft, vertical entry into the sea, a meteor strike, and even alien abduction. Notwithstanding the passage of 3 years and the expenditure of $160 million scouring thousands of square miles of ocean, the disappearance of Malaysian Air Flight 370 and the 239 people aboard remains a mystery. Number 2. The Kryptos Sculpture. The main part of this sculpture is located in the northwest corner of the new headquarters building courtyard outside of the agency's cafeteria. The sculpture comprises 4 large copper plates with other elements consisting of water, wood, plants, red and green granite, white quartz, and petrified wood. The most prominent feature is a large vertical S-shaped copper screen resembling a scroll or a piece of paper emerging from a computer printer, half of which consists of encrypted text. The characters are all found within the 26 letters of the Latin alphabet, along with question marks, and are cut out of the copper plates. The main sculpture contains 4 separate enigmatic messages, 3 of which have been deciphered. In addition to the main part of the sculpture, Jim Sanborn also placed other pieces of the art at the CIA grounds, such as several large granite slabs with sandwiched copper sheets outside the entrance to the new headquarters building. Several Morse code messages are found on these copper sheets, and one of the stone slabs has an engraving of a compass rose pointing to a lodestone. Other elements of Sanborn's installation include a landscaped garden area, a fish pond with opposing wooden benches, a reflecting pool, and other pieces of stone, including a triangle-shaped black stone slab. The name Kryptos comes from the ancient Greek word for hidden, and the theme of the sculpture is intelligence gathering. The cost of the sculpture in 1988 was $250,000, worth $500,000 in 2016. The ciphertext of the left-hand side of the sculpture of the main sculpture contains 869 characters in total, 865 letters, and 4 question marks. In April 2006, however, Sanborn released information stating that a letter was omitted from this side of Kryptos for aesthetic reasons to keep the sculpture visually balanced. There are also 3 misspelled words in the plain text of the deciphered first 3 passages, which Sanborn has said was intentional, and 3 letters, YAR, near the beginning of the bottom half of the left side are the only characters on the sculpture in superscript. The right-hand side of the sculpture comprises of a keyed Vigenère inscription tableau, consisting of 867 letters. One of the lines of the Vigenère tableau has an extra character, L. Bauer, Link, and Moll suggest that this may be a reference to the Hill cipher as an encryption method for the 4th passage of the sculpture. However, Sanborn omitted the extra letter from small Kryptos models that he sold. Number 1. The Somerton Man. The Somerton Man was an unidentified man whose body was found on the 1st of December 1948 on the beach of Somerton Park, a suburb of Adelaide, South Australia. The case is also known after the Persian phrase tamam shud, meaning is over or is finished, which was printed on a scrap of paper found months later in the fob pocket of the man's trousers. The scrap had been torn from the final page of a copy of Rubaiyat, authored by 12th century poet Omar Khayyam. Following a public appeal by the police, the book from which the page had been torn out was located. On the inside back cover, detectives read through indentations left from previous handwriting, a local telephone number, another unidentified number, and text that resembled a coded message. The text has not been deciphered or interpreted in any way that satisfies authorities on the case. The case had been considered, since the early stages of the police investigation, one of Australia's most profound mysteries. There has been intense speculation ever since regarding the identity of the victim, the cause of his passing, and the events leading up to it. Public interest in the case remains significant for several reasons. The passing occurred at a time of heightened international tensions following the beginning of the Cold War, the apparent involvement of a secret code, the possible use of an undetectable poison, and the inability of authorities to identify the passed away man. On the 26th of July 2022, Adelaide University professor Derek Abbott, in association with genealogist Colleen M. Fitzpatrick, claimed to have identified the man as Charles Webb, an electrical engineer and instrument maker born in 1905, based on genetic genealogy from DNA of the man's hair. South Australia Police and Forensic Science South Australia have not verified the result, but South Australia Police said that they were cautiously optimistic about it. Number 10. Gabby Petito. If you've followed the case of 22-year-old Gabby Petito, you'll know that social media has played an imperative role in the investigation. Petito documented her road trip with her fiance at the time, Brian Laundrie, via Instagram, making sure to vlog and capture their favorite moments. Unknowingly, she provided investigators with a timeline of events leading up to her disappearance. Gabby soon went missing, and over on TikTok, a wealth of users were actively trying to piece together clues on the case. The hashtag Gabby Petito earned more than 500 million views, seeing users break down footage and come up with their own theories. Not only did TikTok raise attention to the Petito case, it also brought forward TikToker Miranda Baker. Baker claimed that she had picked up a person of interest, Brian Laundrie, saying he kind of hurried out of the car and then was like, "I'm going to find someone else to hitchhike." And we're like, okay. It was a weird situation. As we know, Gabby Petito's body had been found, and Brian Laundrie was named a key suspect by the police. After police interviews with the family of Brian and further investigation by police, Brian's body was found in Florida Park. Number 9. Alyssa Turney. Miss Turney did not only campaign for justice, she also became an amateur sleuth. She recorded conversations with her father and shared the clips on YouTube. She pored over old home videos and posted footage on TikTok. At one point, she described efforts to locate her sister's body. Alyssa was extremely sweet, strong, and sweet, Miss Turney said. The sisters lost their mother to cancer when they were young and were mostly raised by Mr. Turney, Miss Turney's biological father and Alyssa's stepfather and legal guardian. Of course, we fought like normal sisters over toys, over hair, over clothes, Miss Turney said. But when she was on the cusp of becoming a teenager, she said she and her sister grew closer. "I didn't really feel the need to tattle as much," she said. "I was finally accepted into the cool kids club." That was just before Alyssa disappeared. Mr. Turney has been accused of abusing, surveying, and controlling Alyssa, and Miss Turney has publicly shared some of the video footage he recorded. In one clip from 2000, it appears that Mr. Turney sat in a parking lot to film Alyssa while she worked at a fast food restaurant. At Mr. Turney's residence in Phoenix, they found 26 pipe bombs and 3 incendiary devices, according to an FBI statement. In an interview with ABC News in 2009, Mr. Turney suggested that the explosives were not meant to hurt innocent people. He also said that he had not ended his stepdaughter. In response to questions about whether he had been a controlling parent, he said that he had been trying to keep Alyssa safe. "I look back at it because she ran away as a result of that," he added. "Yeah, of course I feel bad about it." In 2010, Mr. Turney pleaded guilty to the unlawful possession of unregistered destructive devices, a felony, and was sentenced to a decade in prison. He served 7 years. Miss Turney's social media campaign kicked off around the time of his release. A lawyer for Mr. Turney did not immediately respond to a request for comment. It was unclear how Miss Turney's online efforts affected the case, and Detective Anderson did not say what evidence prompted the slaughter charge this month. Number 8. Sofia Juarez. Sofia disappeared shortly after 8 p.m. on Tuesday, February 4th, 2003, one day before her 5th birthday. She was at home with her mother playing with some of her young uncles. Jose Lopez Torres, her grandmother's boyfriend, was preparing to leave for a nearby convenience store and had asked the children if they wanted to join him. Although the others refused, Sofia decided to take him up on the offer at the last minute. Torres, however, was not aware she had changed her mind and left the house without Sofia. Around this time, Sofia asked her mother for $1 to spend at the store. door. Maria watched Sofia leave the room and heard her close the door as she left the house. Although the case of Sofia Juarez is yet to be solved at the time of recording, TikTok did provide investigators with somewhat of a lead earlier in the year. 4-year-old Juarez went missing in 2003 after being kidnapped outside of her home in Kennewick, Washington. Back in May 2021, a TikTok video went viral after a 22-year-old woman claimed in Spanish that she might have been kidnapped. Investigators looked into the clip, and although the case is yet to be solved, Kennewick police did reveal that they had a new lead regarding a highly credible witness. Number 7. Jessica Lewis and Austin Wenner. A US landlord had been found guilty of executing 2 tenants in a case that made headlines when TikTok refused to take down videos of the victims' bodies. Michael Dudley of Burien, near Seattle, was convicted of ending Jessica Lewis, 35, and Austin Cash Wenner, 27. In June 2020, Dudley, who was 64, shot and mutilated the victims before disposing of their remains in suitcases. Later that month, 3 teenagers were making TikTok videos on a Seattle beach when they found the bodies. Their footage of the discovery was viewed more than 30 million times, but TikTok initially said the video did not violate their terms of service. The company came under pressure from relatives of the victims, and the video was taken down several months later, although it is unknown whether it was deleted by TikTok or the teenager who initially posted it. The 3 teenagers called police as soon as they discovered the suitcases, leading to the execution investigation. The court in Seattle saw testimony from a neighbor who had heard gunshots and a man pleading for his life. Police initially went to the home, but nobody answered. Dudley was later arrested. Court documents indicate Lewis and Wenner got into a dispute over unpaid rent with Dudley, in whose home they were living. Dudley will be sentenced in March and faces a maximum sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. Number 6. Claire Miller. Claire is charged with ending Helen Miller, who is 19, who had cerebral palsy, while Helen was asleep in her bed last year. Claire was in court for Workman's announcement at 1:30 p.m. and cried intermittently throughout the proceeding. She sobbed heavily after learning that she would face adult proceedings, which would likely carry a longer sentence and be less focused on rehabilitation as the juvenile system. Claire hugged her mother after the ruling before being let out of the courtroom. Her parents had asked the judge to transfer her case to the juvenile system, saying they had already lost one daughter and did not want to lose their second daughter as well. Extensive mental health treatment is necessary, Workman said. More time beyond what the juvenile court jurisdiction permits is necessary to treat her and to assure she is healthy and not a danger to herself or the community. Claire has around 4 years and 10 months until her 21st birthday, at which point juvenile court would no longer have jurisdiction over her case. The ruling came after 3 days of testimony in late June, with competing versions of a perfectionist girl who had been bullied and suffered a psychotic break, or someone obsessed with criminal cases of execution, who wouldn't engage with therapists and was coming up with attention-seeking excuses. The case of Claire Miller wasn't necessarily solved via TikTok, but the platform definitely raised awareness and intensified police focus on the teen. Number 5. Michael Lee Dudley. This was included in a point previously, but I wanted to dive deeper into it on why TikTok was a part of the situation. While recording a TikTok, a group of teens discovered a black suitcase washed up on the coast of Duwamish Head, West Seattle, Washington on June 19, 2020. The teens were unsure of what was inside the suitcase, but noticed a foul smell coming out of it. Becoming concerned with what contents may lie within the mysterious suitcase, they called the police. Police later arrived to find Jessica Lewis's and Austin Wenner's dismembered remains, which were in garbage bags within the suitcase. A medical examination revealed the suspect shot 27-year-old Wenner and 35-year-old Lewis at least 10 days before the teens discovered their bodies. The investigation revealed that 62-year-old Michael Dudley, after finding evidence of a recently cleaned and repainted apartment in which the couple previously resided, police charged Dudley with second-degree execution. He is currently being held on a $5 million bond awaiting his trial. Number 4. Isabella Guzman. Isabella Guzman recently gained popularity on TikTok for her odd behaviors during her 2013 trial for the execution of her mother. On August 28th, 18-year-old Guzman stabbed her mother, Yoon Mi Hoy, 79 times, claiming Hoy and her stepfather abused her for years. In Aurora, Colorado, court found her not guilty by reason of insanity, and she currently resides at a mental facility. In 2020, TikTok users found footage of Guzman's trial in which she acted strangely and made faces towards the camera. TikTokers would use clips from the trial and add Ava Max's Sweet But Psycho song over it, according to CBS 4 Denver. In November 2020, Guzman conducted a virtual interview in which she requested to be released from her mental facility. Miller claims she was a different person when she ended her mother and that she is mentally stable now. Number 3. Kalisha Williams. A disturbing TikTok video showed the moments before 16-year-old Kalisha Pinky Williams lost her life. After shooting a dance video for TikTok, an unknown suspect ended her in her hotel room at Hyatt Regency Atlanta on December 26, 2020. According to International Business Times, the initial video made at 12:02 in the morning showed just a few seconds of Williams dancing before she stops the video once her door opens. By 12:32 in the morning that same day, Williams is found gone. Police arrested a teen boy, but the actual suspect and motive for the senseless ending are still unknown. Williams' mother, April Smith, believes the mother that chaperoned and paid for her daughter's hotel room should have accountability for her execution as well. Her name was on the hotel room for these minors. So I feel like she should be held accountable for my daughter's passing as well. Fox Atlanta 5 reports. Number 2. Zachary Latham. Problems began to arise between 18-year-old Zachary Latham and his neighbor William T. Durham Sr. after Durham's wife Catherine complained about Latham's reckless driving in their New Jersey neighborhood. Latham was an avid TikTok user, even documenting the incident and taunting the Durham family with several other videos. The fights between Latham and Durham Sr. came to a fatal end on May 4, 2020. According to NJ.com, a brutal battle between the Durham family and Latham and his friends ensued after Durham Sr. and his son visited Latham's property to address his behavior. Latham allegedly exited his home with a stun gun and multiple knives, which he used to stab Durham Sr. numerous times. The extent of Durham's injuries led to his passing hours later at the hospital. Latham's wife allegedly filmed the attack on her cell phone, which Latham hoped to gain TikTok fame. Police arrested and charged Latham with first-degree execution, 2 counts of second-degree aggravated assault, and additional weapons charges. Durham's wife and 2 sons also received charges relating to trespassing and assault. Latham claims that he used self-defense to protect himself from Durham Sr. and his sons. Latham received a release from a Superior Court judge until his trial, but he is back in jail after his recent arrest for allegedly threatening a motorist. Latham continued to speak on his case with a new TikTok account, but authorities quickly shut it down. Number 1. Bryan Kohberger. On TikTok, conspiracy theories ran rampant in the absence of an arrest. True crime lovers suspected the roommates, who were asleep and unharmed at the time of the executions of the 4 Idaho University students. Others blamed a food truck owner who has been seen interacting with the victims that same night. Both had been ruled out by police as suspects. The allegations have gone so far as to elicit a lawsuit from a professor after a TikTok user falsely claimed she planned the executions. Idaho police announced arrest in endings for 4 University of Idaho students. Most people don't stop and think about the ramifications of what it means for these speculations to be public, says Pamela Rutledge, a media psychologist who studies human behavior. What started as curiosity has spiraled into an online witch hunt, resulting in harassment, defamation, and doxing. Unless you are directly involved in the investigative process, publicly accusing anyone should be off limits, says Tristan Engels, a licensed clinical forensic psychologist. This is how innocent people lose jobs, families, and even their lives. People are going down these rabbit holes and they're hyper-focusing on one individual and attacking that individual, said Tana Davis, an Idaho State Police trooper who is helping the Moscow Police Department handle media interview requests. Bryan Kohberger was later arrested, and maybe it was the help of some TikTok users, but a lot of them really just harmed instead of helped. Number 10. Carbon monoxide. This is a crazy story. So one user on Reddit stated a bunch of things in a post regarding post-it notes that they kept finding. They said this: on the 15th of April, I found a yellow post-it note in a handwriting that wasn't mine on my desk, reminding me of some errands I had to do, but told literally nobody about. While odd, I chalked it up to something I did in my sleep, thinking maybe in my half-awake state I scrawled it so it didn't appear to be my handwriting. I threw it out and thought little of it. On the 19th, I found another post-it note on the back of my desk chair, in the same handwriting as the previous note, telling me to make sure I saved my documents. I was freaked out, but there were no other signs of a break-in, so I set up a webcam in my house aimed at my desk and used a security cam app for it to record after detecting movement. On the 28th, I woke up to find another post-it note, this one saying, "Our landlord isn't letting me talk to you, but it's important we do." I immediately checked the webcam's folder on my computer and found nothing from the night before, but my computer's recycling bin had been emptied, which I am certain I did not do recently, indicating someone had noticed the webcam and deleted the files. They were just saved straight to a folder on my desktop called webcam. Today, on the 1st of May, I found another post-it note, this time on the outside of my door with nothing written on it. And there also appeared to be post-its on many other doors in my apartment complex, all blank in varying colors. Another user, and probably aspiring detective, responded with this: "You seem sincere, and this doesn't appear to be a plot of a Ray Bradbury short story. It's possible that your landlord is leaving notes inside your apartment, but they don't make any sense in the context you're describing them. It's likely that you are writing the notes yourself, but you are forgetting. Do you use post-it notes as reminders in any other parts of your life or job? Yes, this might be a mental health issue. You might be experiencing some sort of dissociative disorder, or it might be a physical problem. You mentioned that you have a very unusual narrow bedroom with no windows. Is there a chance that you are not getting enough ventilation when you sleep, or that there is a carbon monoxide leak in the building? A cheap CO detector, which you should have anyway, is a fast way to find out. You'll also have really bad headaches. It turns out their landlord had stuffed their ventilation pipes with a rag and flooded the tenant's house with carbon monoxide. The user who responded likely saved the OP's life with their suggestion of a CO detector." Number 9. Listening device. While staying at a hotel in Wales, for some reason, one Redditor's cousin unscrewed their power outlet in the room and found some sort of device hidden in the wall. They sent an image to their cousin, and they took to the subreddit r/whatisthisthing and asked fellow Redditors about the object. Turns out, a user found the exact model of the device and linked it. Here's the post. "Found it. This seems to be almost the same like you found. Seems to be a cheap GSM bug where the battery was replaced by a mains power supply. Can you confirm that it has a SIM card? I think the case is clear now. It is a long-range listening device using the GSM phone network. With the power supply, and if it was well hidden, it could have been there for quite a long time. Was definitely used to spy." That's some scary stuff right there. I think I'll pack a screwdriver next time I'm staying at a hotel. Number 8. Luca Magnotta. In 2005, Magnotta, who was going by his birth name at the time, was convicted of 1 count of impersonation and 3 counts of fraud. He had taken advantage of a mentally disabled young woman by convincing her to apply for credit cards and then using those credit cards himself to purchase over $10,000 worth of goods. He was also accused of assaulting the woman, although that charge was later dropped. He pleaded guilty and received a 9-month conditional sentence with 12 months of probation. The court noted at the time that Magnotta had significant psychiatric issues and did not always take his medication. In 2010, Magnotta posted a YouTube video titled "One Boy, Two Kittens," in which he deliberately suffocated 2 kittens in a plastic bag with a vacuum cleaner. He later published a second video of himself, this time drowning a cat in a bathtub. A third video showed him feeding a cat to a python. In January 2011, a private Facebook group identified Magnotta as the person in these videos. Animal rights activist groups subsequently offered a $5,000 reward for bringing him to justice. He was initially dubbed the Vacuum Kitten Butcher by the online internet activists. The internet community, which had identified Magnotta, reported him to authorities, warning that after committing acts of animal cruelty, he might pose a threat to humans. Their investigation was later chronicled in the 2019 true crime docuseries Don't F With Cats. In February 2011, Toronto police began investigating Magnotta in connection with the videos, after receiving a complaint from the Ontario Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. The OSPCA also contacted the Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals in Britain, the American FBI, and police in Montreal due to the suspect's extensive travels. After a long investigation and a new subreddit being created dedicated for the manhunt of Luca Magnotta after he executed a human being, he was caught and identified by Reddit users to be inside of an internet cafe in Berlin. Number 7. Unlawful officer. Walter Scott was a black man who was fatally shot by police officer Michael Slager in South Carolina. Scott was unarmed and running away from Slager when he was shot 8 times. A bystander filmed the whole thing on his phone, and the footage was widely seen online. A Canadian Redditor named Daniel Vauchart stabilized the original shaky footage so the order of events was clear. A cinematographer by trade, Vauchart says he got involved because the truth is the foundation of everything. While stabilizing the footage, he spotted a piece of evidence that could potentially corroborate the police officer's defense. In the police report for the incident, it was said that after handcuffing the man they had just shot 8 times, CPR was performed. In reality, the video shows that no CPR was performed at all. Later on, a second officer arrives, puts on blue medical gloves, and attends to Mr. Scott, but is not shown performing CPR. As sirens wail in the background, a third officer later arrives, apparently with a medical kit, but is also not seen performing CPR. This means that on the professional account of what happened there, the police just straight up lied on their report. It's almost unfathomable why you would handcuff a man whom you just shot 8 times, then lie about how you tried saving the man's life with CPR when nothing of the sort happened. The worst part about them lying is that they saw the guy who was filming and yelled at the individual. They knew the guy was recording and saw everything unfold and still lied on the report, thinking they could get away with it. The officer involved in the shooting was charged with the execution of Walter Scott, thankfully, but that doesn't take away the injustice performed by the police. Number 6, Grateful Doe. In 1995, Eric Hager picked up a young hitchhiker in his van. The van would eventually swerve off the road and hit a tree, ending both passengers. The hitchhiker was too injured to be identified. Without ID, but with the banned Grateful Deed ticket stubs in his pocket, he was identified as Grateful Doe. Around 20 years later, a Redditor named Layla Betts found the cold case online and started digging. She eventually started a Grateful Doe subreddit where others joined in the hunt for answers. Eventually, photo reconstructions and a chance message from someone who turned out to be the victim's former roommate led to Jason Callahan's mom, who confirmed her son went missing after he left to follow the Grateful Deed's tour in '95. That turned into DNA confirmation. After 20 years, Jason Callahan was finally put to rest, thanks in large to Betts and the Reddit community who'd backed her dogged curiosity. Number 5, Hit and Run. In recent years, a user named Meatheaded posted a photo of a piece of a headlight he'd found at the scene of a hit and run, along with the question, any idea what it belongs to? Some 435 comments later, users eventually pinpointed it as a piece of a gray 1991 Cadillac Brougham, and Meatheaded did the rest. I sent a link of my findings, thanks to you guys, to the auto theft unit. So you guys know, in the original accident, the suspect was identified after he was seen yelling out the window that the car was stolen, but we could never find the car. So not only will he go down for several traffic crimes, but it looks like auto theft as well, assuming the damage matches. You guys rock. Number 4, Obsessed. When the media serves up unsolved mysteries like the podcast Serial or the Netflix series Making an Executioner, leave it to Reddit to take up the charge of finishing the job, or at least talking about it a lot. Making an Executioner's subreddit has almost 65,000 subscribers and Serial's almost has 51,000. Both forums are full of theories, speculation, and even some on-the-ground reporting, like guided video tours of the locations mentioned in Serial. But nothing new was uncovered, and these unsanctioned investigations gave a lot of police officers and reporters pause. How can we be sure 50,000 untrained truth seekers will keep ethics in mind when digging for answers? We can't. Siblings of both Hae-Min Lee, the victim at the center of Serial's story, and Adnan Syed, the man convicted of executing her, have intervened online, reminding sleuths that they're dealing with real people, real families, and real lives. But as the saying goes, nothing ventured, nothing gained. Number 3, Subway Ciphers. It sounds like a plot from a bad spy movie. A mysterious person hands an ordinary subway rider a note and a $50 bill and then disappears into the crowd. The note is a coded message, but the subway rider is no spy or secret agent. So how to decode it? Enlist Reddit readers, that's how. The ordinary man, Reddit user Delver of Secrets, told his fellow Reddit friends via a post that he got a note and a $50 bill from a raggedy looking man on the subway. The note was a grid of letters on the front, and on the back it contained 2 rows of letters. Some of the letters were in Hebrew and Russian. The first message said, "There's plenty more money to make. Figure this out and prepare to meet July 19th, 56th and 6th hot dog stand outside Rue 57 Cafe. Ask for Mr. Input." After the Redditors decoded that message though, Delver of Secrets said another message came, also encrypted, that said, "You have managed to find the message with the help of friends. You changed the rules, now so will I. July 12, 4 p.m. at 6.5 and 56th, and tell him you are the last." The second message came from a Redditor called Hoboman, and other Redditors noted that the username led to an IP address at a military base in Arizona, one that specializes in intelligence training. Number 2, Brad Willman. Willman identifies himself as a private computer cop, and previously used the aliases Garby and Omnipotent. In the late 1990s, Willman began tracking and investigating people who downloaded predatory content from the internet. At some time before 2000, Willman devised a Trojan horse, a type of computer program that he used to conduct his investigations. The Trojan horse was posted to websites of interest to predators in a way that it appeared to be a picture file attached to a message, but was actually a program file. When a visitor to the predatory website downloaded the file, the visitor unwittingly downloaded the Trojan horse, and would typically be unaware that it was running on his or her computer. Willman had no control over who chose to download the Trojan horse. Once it had been downloaded, Willman could access, search, and retrieve files from the infected computer. Willman stated, "My whole intent after the program started working as I expected it to was to help." Willman estimated that his Trojan horse gave him access to between 2,000 to 3,000 computers that had been used to visit websites of interest to predators, including those of police officers, military personnel, social workers, priests, and judges. It's possible he used Reddit to get some help. Number 1. Sean Power. An Ottawa man who tracked his stolen laptop to a bar in New York City became a Twitter sensation overnight after some of his followers on the social networking website went to the location and confronted the man allegedly using his computer. Sean Power said his MacBook was stolen 3 days ago in New York. At first, he forgot that he had installed a free tracking program called Prey 6 months ago. But when he remembered about the software a couple days later, he set about to track his computer down. Power began chronicling his efforts on Twitter some night and started using Prey's capabilities to gather information on the man who was in possession of his computer, including a picture taken with the computer's built-in camera. Not only did I have his face, but I also had a screenshot of what the person was doing. So over the next hour and a half, I had him logging into his Skype account, logging into his Gmail. Power told CBC News. I even had his bank account with the total amount of money that he had. I guess he just didn't realize that this was happening. At number 10, Atsumi Yoshikubo. Yoshikubo, a Japanese psychiatrist, was last seen on the morning of October 22, 2014, walking along the Ingram Trails in a wooded area on the northern outskirts of Yellowknife, Northwest Territories, Canada. Her disappearance was not noted until 3 days later, when she had failed to check out of her hotel and the staff found her luggage, all packed in her room. An intense search both by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and concerned local residents over the next few days was called off after a week when the RCMP announced that their investigation had led them to conclude that she came to Yellowknife with the intent to disappear into the wilderness, although she had bought a return ticket to Japan and souvenirs. 10 months later, a hunter discovered some of her personal effects along with human remains in the bush off the highway. On April 14, 2016, those remains were positively identified as Yoshikubo. Although the hunter found remains, it's possible she's still out there, and the RCMP just wanted to cover it up to make the public less worried about disappearances. Maybe it'll be solved this year. Number 9. Susan Walsh. Susan Walsh was an American writer and freelance journalist who disappeared outside her home in Nutley, New Jersey on July 16, 1996. Her disappearance was widely publicized into the late 1990s, especially after several newspapers and media outlets published articles implying that her disappearance was potentially linked to the Russian mafia or New York City's underground vampire community, both subjects that she had investigated while writing for the Village Voice. On July 16, 1996, Walsh left her apartment complex in Nutley, New Jersey, which she shared with her son. Her estranged husband, Mark, lived below them. Walsh had left to run errands and make a telephone call at a payphone across the street, leaving her son for the time being in the care of his father. It was the last time that Walsh was ever seen. Police were able to eliminate Walsh's ex-husband as a suspect in her disappearance. It was later noted that the page for the entire month of July 1996 was missing from Walsh's calendar in her apartment. Although police had few clues to follow up on in their investigation, rumors circulated that Walsh's disappearance might have been connected to the investigative journalism she had been doing at the time. Number 8. Amy Bechtel. On the morning of the 24th of July, 1997, the 24-year-old left her apartment to run errands. At 2:30 that afternoon, Bechtel was seen at a photo shop. This was the last confirmed sighting of Bechtel. It is believed that she left the photo shop and drove into the Shoshone National Forest to check the course of a 10K race her gym was planning. When her husband returned home at 4:30 p.m., she was not home. By nightfall, he alerted neighbors and the sheriff's department. Bechtel's white Toyota station wagon was found parked off a dirt road in the Shoshone Forest. No trace of Bechtel has been found. By 3 a.m. on July 25, 1997, an extensive search for Bechtel was underway from law enforcement, as well as her husband and the couple's friends and family. By July 27th, police were receiving roughly 1,000 calls per day with tips and potential leads in Bechtel's disappearance. Additionally, various lakes and mines were searched with no results. Number 7. Suzanne Lyle. Lyle was last seen getting off a bus on the campus of the State University of New York at Albany on the night of the 2nd of March 1998. After returning from her job at a nearby shopping mall, her ATM card was used the next afternoon to withdraw money at a convenience store elsewhere in the city. Since then, no signs of her have been found, and foul play has been suspected. Her parents have successfully lobbied for changes in state and federal laws regarding missing person investigations on college campuses, and founded the Center for Hope to support families of the missing. The next morning, March 3rd, Condon, who attended a different college in the Albany area, called Doug and Mary Lyle to tell them Suzanne had not returned to her dorm the night before and was missing. She usually phoned or emailed him after returning from work and had not answered his calls to her dorm room. They called the campus police to formally report her missing, and were told that brief absences were not uncommon for college students, so they should not worry as it was likely that she would soon reappear. She did not reappear. Number 6, Joan Lawrence. Lawrence disappeared in November 1998. She was reported missing by 57-year-old Alan Marshall, a former limo driver who also resided on the lawn farm and had become close with Lawrence. Marshall told police he heard gunshots and saw a backhoe being operated around the time of Lawrence's disappearance. Police obtained a search warrant for the property that December. Despite an extensive search by lake, land, and air, they failed to find Lawrence's body. Notably, half a dozen of her cats had been fatally shot. The Lawn's uncle, Ron Allen, eventually claimed responsibility. The OPP investigation continued, and by July 2000, police had discovered 3 more of Lawn's residents who could not be accounted for: 90-year-old John Semple, 71-year-old John Crofts, and 70-year-old Ralph Grant. Like other Lawn residents, the missing men were marginalized and had been brought to Muskoka from homeless shelters in Toronto. These men's pension checks continued to be cashed, although they had not been seen on the Lawn property or elsewhere. The Lawns had failed to report that they were missing. This led police to uncover a pension check scam and charged David, Walter, Walter's wife Karen, Paul, and Catherine with defrauding the federal government of the benefit money it was providing Semple, Crofts, Grant, and other residents who had passed or were missing. The charges against David and Karen were dropped, but Walter, Catherine, and Paul pled guilty. Number 5, Reisa Reisanen. On the evening of the 16th of October 1999, Reisa Reisanen was out celebrating with a friend. She called her boyfriend from her mobile phone at 10:18, indicating that she wanted to join him at a house party in the suburbs, if she could get a lift. Before doing so, Reisanen and her friend visited a restaurant in the city center. Although aged only 16, they had got in using fake IDs. However, they stayed in the restaurant for only half an hour, leaving when Reisanen's friend received a phone call from her boyfriend, inviting her to a party outside Tampere. Reisanen's friend received a lift to the party from some friends, but Reisanen stayed behind as there was no room for her in the car. Reisanen's friend checked to make sure Reisanen's phone was charged and gave her some money. The last confirmed sighting of Reisanen was from this time at 10:50, near the Sokos department store in central Tampere. After that, there were several unconfirmed reports of someone resembling her. The police believe that CCTV footage from the area also shows her in the city center at around 11:50, an hour after the last confirmed sighting. Because of the EU summit being held in Tampere that day, security had been tightened and there was an increased police presence in the city, with additional police resources brought in from other parts of the country. However, the use of CCTV monitoring was considerably less in 1999 than it is now. Reisanen was never found. Number 4, Zeb Quinn. At around 9 p.m. on Sunday, January 2nd, 2000, Zeb Quinn ended his shift at the electronics department of a Walmart in Asheville, North Carolina. At the time, Quinn had been enrolled in an ROTC program. He had plans to travel after work to Leicester with Robert Jason Owens, one of his coworkers, to buy a new car. Quinn met Owens in the Walmart parking lot before they drove separately to look at the vehicle. The two men were seen on surveillance footage at a nearby gas station at approximately 9:15 p.m., purchasing sodas at a convenience store. According to Owens, after leaving the gas station, Quinn signaled for him to pull over by flashing his high beams. Quinn told him that he had received a page and needed to return the call. After he returned from using a payphone, Owens described Quinn as frantic. Quinn told him that he needed to cancel their plans and eventually sped off, rear-ending Owens' truck in the process. Hours later, Owens was treated at a hospital for fractured ribs and a head injury that he said he sustained in a second car accident that evening. No accident report was filed with the police. The following afternoon, Quinn's mother, Denise Vlahakis, filed a missing persons report. Number 3, Trevor Deely. On the 8th of December 2000, Irishman Trevor Deely disappeared in Dublin. He had been walking home around 4 in the morning from his office's Christmas party and had needed to go to the bank where he worked for an umbrella as well as to get certain things in order for his shift the next day. The Christmas party was scheduled for Thursday the 7th of December. After drinks in Copperface Jack's and the Hilton Hotel, the party moved to Buck Whaley's nightclub on Lower Leeson Street. Dalia left Buck Whaley's at around 3:25 a.m. There was a heavy storm that night with gusts as high as 60 or 70 miles per hour, and there was also a taxi strike. About 10 minutes after leaving the nightclub, Dalia arrived at his office and was let in after calling security. While in his office, Dalia made a cup of tea and spoke to a colleague, Carl Pender, who was working the night shift. He also checked his emails and wrote a note of things he needed to do at work the following morning. He left the office at 4:03 a.m., taking an umbrella with him, and continued in the direction of Ballsbridge. CCTV footage shows that a man dressed in black was waiting outside the gates of the bank for approximately half an hour before Dalia arrived. When Dalia arrived, they had a brief conversation. 2 minutes after Dalia entered the bank, 2 more men arrived at the gate. While they have since been cleared as colleagues of Dalia, the man in black remains a person of interest. This footage represents the last known sighting of Dalia. Number 2. On a Wednesday afternoon of April 11th, 2001, Perry invited his friend Gina over to his house to help clean the residence as his father, Bob Perry, who had recently been hospitalized, was due to return home. At this same time, 2 other unnamed men were outside the residence working on Bob's car, which needed a new alternator. At approximately 3 p.m., Perry told Gina he was going to take a pair of jumper cables outside to a shed adjacent to the house. This was the last time he was seen. On April 12th, Perry's grandmother, Joanne, stopped by his home and found the house unlocked and deserted. She found this unusual and called the residence periodically over the next several days, but got no answer. Upon calling Perry's mother, Rebecca Clino, she found she had not spoken to him either. Bob was discharged from the hospital several days later than planned, and after his release, he and Clino filed a missing person report on April 17th. Ground search parties were organized by Nottoway County Police within a 15-mile or 24-kilometer radius of the Perry residence. Numerous fields, farms, and abandoned buildings were searched, but the efforts proved fruitless. During a search of the property, police were unable to locate the jumper cables Perry had purportedly left to return in the shed. 2 weeks later, however, they were found just inside the door. Number 1. Kirk von Ackerman. Von Ackerman was an intelligence officer in the United States Air Force and had previously served as a Russian linguist in the United States Army. Among his roles in the Air Force was that of former Deputy Director of Intelligence for NATO operations in Kosovo in 1999, where he had been decorated for operations behind enemy lines. He was employed by Ultra Services of Istanbul, Turkey, when he disappeared in Iraq on October 9, 2003. His car was found empty on a road between Kirkuk and Tikrit, with his equipment and $40,000 still inside. On December 14, 2003, his colleague Ryan G. Manelik was gunned down just after leaving Camp Anaconda. The major procurement fraud unit in the U.S. Army Criminal Investigation Command is investigating. The CID had not given a firm conclusion on when or where Von Ackerman may have passed away, although there is a presumption that it may have happened on October 9, 2003, in a botched kidnapping attempt. They still, however, refuse to give out information on this case, which is still active. Von Ackerman's body was never found. The Defense POW/MIA accounting agency lists Von Ackerman as one of 5 remaining missing servicemen or DoD contractors since the onset of Operation Desert Storm.